Okay, so hi to everybody. Thanks for joining the training session. Let me introduce myself. I'm Rossella Rato and I'm part of the Risk Management and Compliance Department. I'm in Stellantis since 2016. Previously, I worked in XF as a SOX compliance lead in Europe. And starting from this year, I'm joining also the team in XP. So I'm trying to help in this journey. Just a couple of notes before starting with the training. Due to the large amount of the people that are connected, this session is not an interactive one, but you have on the link of the meeting a form. So a link to the form. You can send to us the question. We will reply as soon as possible to your question. The session will be led by myself and also by another colleague. I will leave the speech to the other colleague later. So let's start with the training. Basically, we would like to give you an introduction of what is a SOX, which are the type of the controls, which are the players involved, the timing, because we also knew that we need to have a deadline, so a timing, and the controls, the tests, and let me say other specific topics related to SOX. What is SOX? The mergers of PSA Group and FCA became effective on January 2021. After the completion of the transaction, Stellantis became a New York Stock Exchange listed company. So Stellantis need to be a SEC registrant and need to follow specific regulatory. So in specific, the SOX. We will see in the next slide which are the main features that we need to comply for the SOX. Basically, we would like to share with you the main topics, so the focus. So SOX is an act that contains 11 sections, but we would like to highlight with you basically two specific sections, so the 302 and the 404. The 302 section is related to CFO and CEO responsibility. They have to report the financial statement, let me say, in the right manner. So these are, let me say, the specific section related to the responsibility for the financial reports. While we would like to highlight the section 404, because let me say that probably you have listened to SOX and the SOX 404, because this is a specific session for the SOX, where there are, let me say, three specific topics that we would like to highlight with you. So that the management is responsible for an adequate internal control structure. B, the management have to be in place an assessment for proving the effectiveness of their internal controls. Then the third point is that a registered external auditor must attend that the internal controls work effectively. So we need to take care about these three specific topics. So first of all, we need to define an internal controls. We need to perform an assessment for proving that our internal controls work effectively. Then an external auditor will, let me say, test us based on our internal controls. This is the main, let me say, topic. So to recap, as I said, we need to define the controls. So management is responsible for an adequate internal control structure. So we need to define controls. Who is in charge of that? For sure, the management. We need to establish a controls framework. There are, let me say, two specific teams in Stellantis that will, let me say, lead this specific topic, that are the GCA, so the Group Control Assurance at the business side. And then we have the SOX IT team that will guide this process. So the other point is that management has to assess the controls framework, so need to prove that our internal controls work effectively. And as you can see, this is led by GCA and the SOX IT team, but with the support of some external consultant. The third topic is the external auditor testing. So right now, the external auditor is EY. External auditor will change in 2024. Stellantis is in progress for defining the new external auditor. But right now, EY is the external auditor. I know that in previous years, you know EYs with the support of Mazars. We don't know if this year EY will be supported also by Mazars, but let me say that we need to focus on EY in EY name. So EY is our external auditor. So this is, let me say, the key topic for the SOX: control definition, management assessment, external auditor testing. This is something that we would like to also highlight with you. So during, let me say, the testing activities, both in internal side, but also in external side, during the testing activity, we can identify some deficiencies. Some deficiencies can have, let me say, different level in the assessment. So we can have control deficiencies, significant deficiencies, or material weakness. So basically, when we have control deficiencies or significant deficiencies, we can say that probably our financial statement audit can be, let me say, appropriate and well represented, even if we have some issues. But we cannot have, let me say, material weakness. Otherwise, the external auditor will raise, let me say, the external auditor will say that our financial statement audit is not reliable. So, and when we have material weakness, usually this material weakness is also presented outside Stellantis. So just to let you know also which are the output of the testing. So usually we can have control, we can have significant deficiencies, but we cannot have material weakness. Otherwise, our financial statement audit is not reliable. So also this kind of definition need to be taken care of in our mind. Which are the players involved? So just to present and to share with you the structures, so the organization. We have myself as SOX IT coordinator, and I'm helping the SOX IT team in SOX topic. We have Francette Jacobson in SOX IT global lead, Fabrizio D'Angelo and Karin Lange as specific for, let me say, enlarged Europe. We have, let me say, a unique team for XF and XP in Europe, but focusing on, let me say, specific topic. Karin is the person in charge that is following since last year the SOX readiness. And we say that also for this year we have, let me say, several project for leading the SOX. Fabrizio is the person in charge that is the lead for the enlarged Europe. Is leading the enlarged Europe in XF, and since starting from this year, is joining also the XP, let me say, project. You can view also in the at high level, we have Fabio Boschiero is the compliance global lead. Gilles Fontaine and Carsten Mecklenburg is the implementation IT lead and financial IT lead. So in the right chart, we have, as you can see, the group control assurance team. their main focus is on business side, so on business controls. Probably many of you know Rose Knapp, that is the Group Control Assurance Lead in XP and larger Europe. So specifically for XP, we have a technical team that is in charge, let me say, to be the main contact for the IT team. You can see many names, probably many of you knows Karin Granier, Silvia Zazzo, Sandrine, Beatrice, Sophie, and Dean. So this is specific for XP. We have put in place a technical team that is in charge to supporting the IT people and IT team in the ICT SOX topics. While we have also the representation of the management tester and external auditor, just to let you know that, as you have read before, we will have a team that will lead the assessment of the management. So we have defined the controls, and we need to assess internally that our controls work effectively, and this will be done by management tester. Last year we have KPMG and Deloitte as a consultant. This year, let me say, we are in progress to define who will be the company that will support us in these activities. And then we have the external auditor, as I said before, EY. Then we have also the representation of the application and control owners that you can see is in contact with the ICT technical team, but for sure also with the SOX ICT team. So this is, let me say, the high level for the enlarged Europe organization with focus specific in XP. So we can briefly also represent the controls scoping and control definition. So as I said before, SOX require to have an internal controls, but the SOX standard does not provide any of specific controls, so does not provide a list of specific controls. Is in charge to the company to define a specific list of controls to meet let me say, the goal. In which way usually the controls is identified. So first of all, the group control assurance perform a risk assessment and the scoping in order to identify the legal entities in scope and the major classes of transaction. So usually we need to identify which are the legal entities that need to be, let me say, in our perimeter. These, let me say, activities is performed every year. So we know that for XP, this is the first year of SOX, but as I said before, XF was in SOX since most of the year. And usually the risk assessment at the legal entity is performed every year. So we define the legal entities, we define the MCOT, and then we define which are the processes and the controls that need to be identified for the year. At least when we have the definition of the legal entities and the MCOT, we also have a clear view on the IT scope and the IT controls that need to be put in perimeter for the year of the certification. So basically, the starting point is the legal entities and the MCOT. Then we have the defining of the processes and the controls. And then we can view in the other slide, we can have a clear definition on IT application in scope. This is the view of our control framework. So the Stellantis control framework. We are highlighting which are the type of the controls in our perimeter. So we have the business process controls that can be manual IT dependent, or automated. The manual IT dependent usually have an IT component that support the controls. That can be a report or the interface. Then we have the specific IT control framework, that is the IT general control framework. And we can see in the next slide which are the main controls related to ITGC. So this is the type of the controls. When we identify the manual IT dependent controls, and then we identify the report and interfaces, so the IPE and the automated controls, we can have, let me say, a more clear vision on which will are the application in scope for ITGC. So just let me say a more detailed description of manual control on the control type. So manual controls, as you can see, are business control, performed by business with no reliance on IT system or data or direct system. Manual IT dependent, as I said before, is performed by business, but rely on some related to IT. So usually a report or some, let me say, data that are passed through some system. IT automated controls are specific functionality within application, so specific configuration. Report and interface are linked to manual IT dependent, so we cannot have only reported interface, but usually we have manual IT dependent with some report or interface, so document or procedure that provide information to the control owner. And then we have the IT general controls, so controls that apply to our IT process, so the manage change, the manage access, and the manage IT operation. So our Stellantis framework is based on this type of controls. Not all the companies in SOX environment have the same definition, but is the most usual control type definition for a framework. We would like to provide to you also, let me say, a sort of high-level description of which are the IT general controls. We will have some detail-specific training for, let me say, the application owner, but just to give you a brief description, we have three main areas, so the access, the change management, and IT operation. So basically, for the access, we have the control specific for the user provisioning. So we need to have the authorization for accessing the application, the password policy and security setting. We need to have, let me say, password policy defined and aligned with the Stellantis policy or the best practice. User termination. We need to have some controls for terminating the user. So usually we require to HR to provide to the IT a list of persons that leave the company, and we have to terminate the user in a timely manner. User access review is something that last year, let me say, in last year we have some issues. So usually the user access review require to review at least once per year the user ID present in the system and also the authorization linked to the user. So a process that will review the user and the authorization. Suite access review, we are talking about the super user ID. So user can have the user ID that have high privilege on the system need to be also reviewed at least once per year. And suite monitoring is related, as I say, to super user ID, and we need to identify in some way which are the activities performed in our system by this user ID. In relation to change management, we have the controls related to change approval, So for every change, we need to have an approval for moving the change in production. Emergency changes is something related to a change that can occur, let me say, in emergency. So probably we cannot have, let me say, the same process, but we are discussing on it, so I will not give you a lot of detail on this. Perform acceptance testing. Every change need to be tested, and we need to have the evidences of the testing. SOD, or manage change, is something related to user that can develop, but also can pass the changes into production. We cannot have the same user that can develop and pass the changes into production. Otherwise, the process is overlapped. If this cannot, let me say, be ensured, we need to define a post-implementation review. Data conversion and IT project testing, as you can see, are controls related to project and cannot be applicable in the year or for the whole application, are something related to project. If we are changing the application, if we are changing the infrastructure, if we are changing the database, if there are some projects in the application, we need to define specific controls. So we ask to all the team, if you are in some project, please advise us so we can discuss with you and define the right controls for this specific area. Then we have the IT operation. As you can see, we have 4 controls. So the job monitoring and job scheduler changes are related to job. So we need to have the review of the job monitoring, and we need to define which are the users that can change the job. Then we have the backup and the restore. At least we need to test once per year the restore, and we need to have a process for ensuring that the backup is performed well during the year. So it's someone look at the backup and the backup is run correctly. So this is the main area for IT general controls. As I said, these controls are applicable at application layer, but also at infrastructure layer. So we need to identify also the controls related to the database and the operating system for the application. So controls are not so many, but we need to take care about this. Then we have this specific session, controls versus test, because we saw in the past that probably there are some misalignment about which is the controls and which is the test. So controls is something that need to be performed, as is wrote in the chart, that need to be performed always, regardless of the source scoping. So when we talk about the change approval, the controls is change approval. So we need to have the approval for every change. And this is something that we need to perform every time that a change is occurred. Who can perform the controls is an application or a control owner. A test is something that, let me say, is performed only when an application is in SOX scope, and the goal is to assess is the controls is performed well. We have the test, the design of the test, or the operating effectiveness. Usually when we have the test of design, we analyze if the controls is designed in appropriate manner and if the risk is covered. So usually when we have the controls definition, we also have, let me say, the risk to cover. So when we perform the test of design, we ensure that the controls is designed for covering the risk. While when we perform the test of effectiveness, we usually see if the controls has run during the year in appropriate manner. So we usually extract the population, we usually pick some example, and we require the evidence through the year. Who performed the test is the management tester or external auditor in this specific, let me say, SOX topic. So some other details on the controls. So we can have the preventive or detective. So controls preventive is something that prevents an error and usually is executed before an action is performed. So as you can see in the example, approval before user creation. While the detective controls is something that take place usually after the transaction, and we can make an example as the user access review. So we have some users that are in the system, so someone approved the user, but we need to review the user at least once per year, and this is the detective controls. Then I spoke before the test, so the test of design and the test of effectiveness. I will not repeat, but just to take care that we have two different phases also for the test. So the design and the effectiveness. Yes, we can go through some example, just to make some differences about the controls and the tests. So we can pick the segregation of duties example for the controls. So we spoke about the SOD on managed changes. So we are talking about the user that cannot develop. The user that can develop cannot have the permission to deploy the code in the production. The preventive controls is to ensure that these two teams are different. The test usually require to have an extraction from the system to see which are the users that have the authorization for developing and the user that have the permission to move the changes into production. So controls is in our mind, in our hands, so we need to define two different teams. The test will review that these teams are different in terms of user, in terms of people. User provisioning, this is also a preventive controls, so authorization. So we have make an example for reunis. So usually when a user requests an access, so applicative services, the access right is validated by applicative service owners. So this is the controls. Auditor, when auditor come and will test these controls, will require the list of users created during the year, will pick some example, and will require to us to provide the log downloaded from reunis to see if all the users were authorized in appropriate manner. Yes, also detective controls, the user termination. So as I said before, usually when we have these controls, we require to the HR to provide to us a list of people that leave the company, and the IT guys in charge of the application need to remove in a timely manner the user ID. So this is the controls. We need to have a list from HR, and we need to block, to remove the user on the application in a timely manner. During the test, auditor will ask to obtain the HR list, usually extract in a sample basis amount for this list, and will check if the user are terminated in the system. Okay, so in the next slide, we would like to also to give to you a sort of timetable, a sort of high-level timing of the main activities. So we spoke about the risk assessment and the scoping, and we say that this is in charge to GCA. Usually the definition of the legal entities, the definition of the measure classes of transaction and so on are in charge to GCA, and these specific activities is performed during March and end in May. Then we have the business process framework review and assessment. This is performed through April and May. And then we have the IT application scoping and ITGC framework definition. So as I said before, as soon as we have the legal entity, the business process definition and the measure classes of transaction, we can define which are the right application to put in scope for the ITGC. And this is done through April and May, but we know that probably something can be, let me say, highlighted also during the year, because usually what happens is that during the year, both the management tester and also the external auditor review the process mapping, the controls definition, and can highlight, let me say, some gaps in terms of controls. So it's not, let me say, unusual that we have application in scope, new application in scope during the year. But let me say that the most of the application need to be defined in scope at least at the end of May, and then we will have some exception during the year. We also have highlighted the control execution in, let me say, infinite row, because it's something that each of you need to perform each time. When a control run, we need to define each time the controls. Then just to give you what will occur during the next week. We will require to you to review the narrative. What are the narrative is the document in which we describe the IT process related to IT general controls. So we describe in which way we provisioning the user, in which way we perform the change management and so on, in terms also the tool, the person and so on. We will require to you each year to review this description and to highlight to us if there are some something to change. This is the basis, let me say, for the test of design, but also for the controls review. Then we have the test of design. Just to give to you this topic. The test of design will be performed both from external auditors, but also from the management tester, because management tester need to assess the internal controls. Then EY, the external auditor, will test the assessment. So the test of design will be performed, let me say, through June and August. We will see if this timeline can be reached. And the test of effectiveness will start from June until November. Then we have the roll forward in December and January. Roll forward is a procedure for saying that we test, as you can see, the test of effectiveness until September. We have October, November, and December in which we do not perform any tests. With the roll forward procedure, we would like to ensure that no changes occurred in our controls. If controls change, we need to perform, let me say, a quick test for ensuring that also for the last month of the year, the controls run effectively. So this is, let me say, the high level timeline for the testing. Then we have also the IP test and the ETAC. Usually also these type of tests are performed starting from May until February, let me say. For the IPE, we usually define 3 rounds of wave. So we usually select the IPE, so the report and interface. We define with GCA the priority. We list the wave and we start to test the IP starting from May until we say until February, because there are some IP and some IT automated controls that cannot be tested before, let me say, December. So usually we tested this type of control in January, February, but let me say that the most of the IP and the ETAC are tested during May, October, November. Then we have also the roll forward for the IP and ETAC, and is performed through an inquiry to say to ask to you if the object is changed during the year or not. So this is, let me say, the high level timeline of the different phases. Okay, so I will switch the speech to my colleague. If you have question, please send us to the forums. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if everybody can see me now. Okay, I think I'm live. So, hello everybody, this is Vittorio Rametta. I am part of the SOX IT Enlarged Europe team, so the one led by Fabrizio D'Angelo. I lead the operative activities of the team, and I am in Stellantis since 2017, working on SOX for the XFCA Enlarged Europe activities, and now enjoying also the ex-PSA part, and so the entire Stellantis activities for the enlarged Europe. Before going on, let me remind you that you have the possibility to raise questions through the form, once again, as said by Rossella before. And we did not choose a live question and ask session because there are many participants and we have limited amount of time, but please feel free to contact us later to have further clarification. Also, the materials that we are presenting and sharing with you will be also shared directly to you so that you can read them, understand them, and use them during the year. And anytime you can contact us for clarification. So let's move on with the aspects. Let me try to switch. Okay. So why SOX formalism? SOX is, as said at the beginning of the presentation, a law, a North American law, and to prove that you follow SOX requirements, internal control rules, you need to go through the audits, so the tests that Rossella talked about, and the SOX formalism is resumed with 2 words: completeness and accuracy. We have this big sentence at the center of the slides. It says, control execution all the time must be proved. If you can't prove it, you didn't execute it. For example, during the audit of a segregation of duties in the mana change, as said before, we can say, yes, we segregate developers from people that can move to production. But if we are not able to prove this, so to prove that the developers do not have modification access in production, we cannot say that we have segregation of duties in place. So maybe in principle we have it, but there's no way to prove it. So auditor cannot say that we actually implement segregation of duties. For being precise in the you didn't execute it, for example, the user access review, maybe we perform user access review during the year, but we don't have the entire set of evidence to prove auditors that we did it in a complete manner. So all the users and their privileges were sent to in review to the managers, to specific business owners. This is also part of standard testing. So when, for example, auditors needs to have a population to perform a sample, say they will ask you, for example, the list of users created during the year. So an extraction of users from the application or directly from Reuni, for those that are integrated with Reuni. And this file is usually editable. So anytime we have reports extracted from a system or a database, this file is always editable. So when we have the extraction of files from system databases, operating system, they must be supported by what we call the completeness and accuracy requirement. This can be achieved in many ways. The most usual ways to achieve these are print screen, full page print screen, performed from the system or from the database, from the operating system whatsoever, plus, of course, the editable file. I will show you some examples of this completeness and accuracy. Another way is to use information technology at its most powerful way. So also having hashing of the file. So proving that the file is specifically the one we were looking at during the extraction, and having a print screen on the operating system. I will show you some examples. First case, we are looking at an SAP system. In this case, we have the user by complex selection criteria. So this is achieved by a standard program of SAP. This is useful when we need to list all the users for an auditor, and we can download this file from the system. But as said, since the file that we will give to the auditor can be an Excel modifiable file, a TXT file, CSV file, so a text file, it is not enough to be alone. It must be supported by this print screen you are looking at. So we are going to show to the auditors that we have we are performing the print screen in a specific moment. So we have date and time at the bottom right corner of our operating system, where we are executing this extraction. It's from a specific system, so we have the name. In addition, we have also the server, in this case, one of the application servers. And then we are also saying what is the report we are extracting, so the name of the report, and then the actual completeness and accuracy evidence. So this report contains 51 users. If the auditor opens the editable file, will find 51 users in the file. Then we have also an additional evidence, which is the number of bytes transmitted. Again, completeness requirement, because we can compare the dimension of the file, the number of bytes, with the ones provided to the auditors. Also, the filters executed, in this case, they are executed in the previous page of SAP, but they are summarized here. We can show that we applied specific filters to obtain this list. This is due to the fact that auditors at any time may need and may ask to reperform this extraction, and they can follow the same steps. We have also accuracy requirement. These are sampled, of course, because we can see details about users, and so about the rows that are contained in the editable file. So if they select some of those users, can specifically find the same things that are present in the print screen. A second example is instead of extracting report from a system, it may be required, and we will see it in the next part of the training. You may be asked to extract evidence from database, because maybe we want to corroborate the fact that a system is properly extracting with specific SQL procedures the report. So we want to replicate the extraction from the database. Or for example, going back to the user extraction list, maybe in a specific custom system, there's no functionality dedicated to the user extraction. So the vendor didn't build it. So how can we obtain a list of users? We can perform a specific query at the database level, because we know that users somewhere must be stored, and they are stored in the database in a specific table, for example. So we have our extraction from the database. How can we prove? And so we will provide auditors with, once again, an editable file, because if you export this from the database, you will have a txt file, CSV file, editable file. So how can I corroborate? How can I prove that the extraction is complete and accurate, that I'm not modifying the file that I'm sending to the auditor, or the file that I used during the performance of my control? So if I perform the user termination control, I extract the users from the system to check if there is any user to be terminated. When I export the file, I must also take print screen from the database in this case. So once again, we have the reference of the system. In this case, it's the instance name. We have a specific name for the instance. It's here. It's also here. In this case, with the user, with the account we are using. Then we have the equivalent of the report that we saw in the SAP before. It's the name of the table from which we are extracting data. There may be more than one table for more complex queries. And we have also the statement, the filters, because we have the where conditions. They are taken in the print screen so that auditors can see that we filtered out those that, or in this case, we included those that this is Italian data scadenza is non-expired users, so this is null, or that it is higher than today because they needed all active users now. And we also ordered them by user ID, so they will find the file ordered by a user ID. Once again, date and time. This can also be achieved by, since we are writing SQL queries, by asking for sysdate to be printed in the file we are going to extract. And we have, again, the completeness evidence, the number of rows, 323 total rows that are so present also in the editable file. Then we have the two columns that have been selected in the select statement of our query. So the auditor, once again, can double check for those rows if there is specific alignment for the data. Last case that I talked about, it is usually helpful for operating system completeness and accuracy extraction. When we have maybe big files, we can rely on the hashing, so on cryptography. And this is, from an audit perspective, from security perspective, the best way, because hashing, obtaining the hash of a specific file provides us with the absolute assurance that the specific file is unique, because auditors can always reperform the hash of the file that they have, the auditable file, and compare the results. If the hash match, nobody altered the file before sending them the specific file. Once again, we have here date and time. This is not in the bottom right part. We have a specific statement. We have the date statement, and the system is reporting the date. We have the hostname statement with the name of the hostname in which we are performing the extraction. Then the control owner in this case navigated to the specific folder, and at the end we also have the hashing of the file we are interested in. This is a .log file, editable file. Once again, we have the hashing. I can see that there some questions are coming. Let's conclude maybe this first step, and I think that we have few minutes to talk about to answer your first questions. So to conclude this first part of the training, what are your responsibilities? So let's go straight to the point, because we showed you the entire process of SOX, also the business involvement in SOX, and it is let me say, a complicated matter. It involves a lot of people, as you saw, but what you should focus on is this one: perform control as defined and communicated to you. We went through last year a SOX readiness, very huge project, very hard project. We found a lot of commitment on your side, but SOX is, always present. It won't stop to the readiness. This is the first SOX certification year for the ex-PSA side, so we will definitely want to be SOX compliant as a Stellantis group, and so you will need to follow the procedures. In which sense? As said by Rosella, we will start sending you the narratives, so the documents in which ITGC procedures are listed, are defined, so there will be, for each application, the explanation on how you apply changes to the production, so to the system. You have a specific test, you have a specific platform to track changes, to have incidents. So be sure you are following the procedures we both agreed on during the SOX readiness. The majority of them were already in place, and maybe they just needed to be proved. So once again, maybe you have the procedure, you are following it, but you're not able to prove it. So if you are obtaining an approval for a deploy into production and you are obtaining it by voice or by phone, there's no way, unless you register the phone, you record the phone, to prove that the specific business approver is providing you with the approval to move to production. So during the test, auditors won't find the evidence of the approval and will say that the control is failed, because there's no way to prove that you obtained the approval, even if you actually obtained, but you couldn't approve. This is also for, it's like any other law. If you can prove it, you did it. Otherwise, you didn't do it. Then review the documentation. So this is, as I said, a huge project. This requires a lot of effort on every side, on our side, on your side, management tester side, external auditors. You will be required to review documentation, confirm, modify, support. So provide explanation and evidences when required. So the test and the auditor and the audit activities are not led by you. You will be asked by auditors, by testers, to provide evidence, to provide explanation. Just be sure you know what happened during the year in your application, how to explain specific technical matters about your application. And if you have been assigned to a specific control to be performed periodically, like user access review, be sure you perform the control by following the procedure and collecting the actual evidence during the audits. Then it will be very easy to prove auditors that you did it and you did it well. Also, communicate changes. As you know, this group is very huge. There are a lot of applications, variety of procedures, tools used to support the business activities or even the applications. We have more than one identity access management among Stellantis. We have more than one ticketing system for changes. So, and since the requirement is converge to one unique procedure for each area, and so there are a lot of projects in Stellantis to converge from XP to XF or vice versa. something will change. Something will change also due to replacement of new technologies. So maybe you, sorry, maybe you will find out that you have you will need to change the technology because it became obsolete. This will require you to raise the hand, contact SOX ICT team and say, we have changed the technology. We changed a specific procedure, or we changed a tool, a supporting tool. We are not going to integrate with the, I don't know, for the user access review with the North America tool anymore. We are going to perform it manually. It's a decision. It doesn't mean that it will be wrong. Just raise the hand and we will find out a way to define a new strategy to prove that you are performing the activities. Other requirement for you: ask anytime something is not clear. SOX, it's new to all of you. It's also sometimes new to the XF IT people, because SOX, it's you know, a specific requirement. Usually IT people, it's required to follow operation. So that's the main goal of IT people. So we are here, we are all here to support. We have also, for the XP involvement, dedicated SOX champions that are in direct contact with us and also with external consultants specifically hired for the matter. So anytime something is not clear, raise the hand, ask if something is not clear. So let's see if we can answer. We have 3 minutes to answer the first you know, questions that we received, and then we will switch to the second part of the training dedicated to the IPE. And okay, let's see. So the first one was about the question and ask on MS Live, and we answered about the impracticability of the solution. The material will be shared with you. This was the second question. Will SOX audit replace the actual audits? No. The internal audit requirements, the actual audit requirements will still be in place. It's a requirement for the internal audit team, so you may still be asked to go through specific audits. Sometimes, however, some efficiency may be achieved. Usually, internal auditors can rely on SOX testing if the procedures they are going to test are the same. So there may be a way to rely on the testing performed during SOX, so you won't be asked to perform it twice. Otherwise, this is not a requirement. They may need still to perform independent audit, since internal audit is not required to rely on SOX testing activities. So one other, let me see if there are some other questions that we can answer now, or we need specific dedicated session to these. Okay, so there somebody said about the in the given example, so we were presenting user data. Different people could manipulate sensitive and or personal data. Are those process manipulation covered by any rules directive? Is before in declaration? Okay, so let's say that auditors and so external auditors and the management test are always signing a non-disclosure agreement. They will be required to non-disclose information, so they will treat sensitive data as the company would. So there's no need to have a specific agreement with the employees about the audits. This is part of the standard sensitive data treatment, so they will be used for the audit needs, only audit needs. So there will be of course no misuse of the sensitive and personal data. So when you will be asked to extract maybe sensitive data, those that you may identify as sensitive data, don't worry. they will be always covered by specific agreement with the external auditor. So they will treat data as if they were internal auditors. So there's no need to hide sensitive data or manipulate them. The key part is do not manipulate reports, because auditors needs to test the actual reports. If there are some HR process in the scope, so some specific HR reports will be tested, auditors will also may need to identify the association of a person with a user ID, not because of activities with respect to that specific person, but with the scope of assessing a specific procedure. Like in the user provisioning, for example, we have an approval, we have the SA owner approval in Reuni, so they are employees of the company. We know that specific people have been assigned to the approval of the assignment. Sorry for the words joke, and so of the assignment of those SA to the users. So if we will be required to perform a print screen proving that a specific person through its user ID performed the approval, there's anything to hide or manipulate. It's absolutely fine. It's following all the privacy laws. Let's move on with the next part of the presentation. And as said before, do not hesitate if we won't have time to answer to your question in the live stream. You can contact us in our personal emails, and we have internal emails, and also it's in the invitation. It's ICFR ICT fcagroup.com. We will send you at the end of the meeting a specific communication. We will share with you the presentation, and we will give you the specific email addresses. So you don't need to write them down now. You will find our email addresses, and you can reach out to us and have the specific questions that we are, however, collecting here. So in the end, when sharing the presentation, if we can find the question here, we will also summarize the answer to everybody, so that everybody can join and obtain the answers. And then we can also have specific texting on the matter. So let me share the second presentation. Okay. So sure, SOX IT training. Okay, I think you can see it now. So the second part of the training is about the IP and automated controls. So as said before, we, in addition to the ITGCs, we also have the IPs, so reports and interfaces. We will look at it better, and also the automated controls. They are all objects that rely on information systems, so they are part of the IT SOX activities. At least on your perspective, you will need to support and provide evidence about them, because some of you will be identified as application owner and control owner. So IPs in detail, we have more than one type. We generally refer to reports and interfaces for the IPE, the information provided by the entity, but there are some specificities that you are required to know, because when there is the step of the definition, so sometimes GCA, our business colleagues will contact you to provide additional information about specific reports or specific data extractions. If you know the specific differences about the various IPs, it would be better, because you can help in the identification of the proper section, and also because for some of them, so it's less work for you, there's no ICT test required. So to identify the difference about specific specific IPs would be better also for you and for the effort is required to you. We identify in general a report as something that is automatically generated by the system, either executing a transaction. So you have a specific user interface, people are going to click on a button and they will be presented with the report, or they may also be automatically spooled by a job from the database and sent to, I don't know, a distribution list. This is completely automatically managed because we have automatic execution of a procedure, SQL procedure or whatsoever, so data extraction procedure, and the report is automatically provided to the business person, so the business user. So key part, there's no human interaction in the generation and presentation of the data. So the only interaction is when the business user may input filters in the generation panel. This won't be your duty, of course. It will depend on how the person uses the report during his or her daily activities. It's not part of the ICT. We of course will rely on the standard report that of course will have in the program some variables, and based on the valorization of the variables, the output of the report may change. Another key part, this will help to distinguish from data retrieve, it's that a change in the report logic will only be possible through a code change, a system code change. So you will need change management to be activated to modify the report. So you will need developers to write down specific code, and it will be deployed in production. Additional thing, no possibility to modify the report in production. If it is modifiable directly in production, the data logic is modifiable in production, we talk about a data retrieve. So data retrieves are generated via human interaction, strong human interaction. In this case, we have no ICT test. They, of course, may also be generated by the system, as said before, but in this case, you can modify them directly in production. I will provide you with an example, and they can so be edited at any time. It's the case, for example, for the we're talking about the example we did in the previous presentation about the query performed at the database level. So we are going to write down specific queries anytime. So if in the daily business operation, there's somebody asking to the IT to perform specific queries on the production database, I don't know, on a monthly basis, because they need specific information, but they do not have a system functionality, there we of course will have an IPE, because they are relying on information system data. But in that case, we're talking about a data retrieve, because the query may be potentially modified voluntarily or involuntarily anytime it is executed. I can add a comma, I can remove a where condition, I will, or a select condition. I will definitely change the code, the program logic, without the need of deploying anything. Another case, it's click sense. So some business intelligence tools, users, if they are skilled enough, they can modify in production the report logic. These business intelligence tools like click sense are built to allow business users to directly modify in production the reports on their own. So this type of reports are usually treated as data retrieve, or the SAP queries, the ones that are executed and modified in production with the SQ01 or 02 transactions. We are in SAP, we're talking about reports for those that are programs executed via specific transactions, or dedicated one like SE80, for example. In this case, if you will be required to provide support with these objects used by the business users, please remind to the auditor that we are talking about a data retrieve. Auditors are aware of this, but they may not know the specific technicalities of your system, so you can help them in identifying these. So if the specific report we are looking at respects one of these conditions, it is a data retrieve, it is not a report. End user computing, another type of IPE, still data business is relying on. There's no system supporting in this case. End user computing are those editable data files that are maintained on business user side. I don't know, they may have Excel file shared in a shared file server, or they may have, I don't know, Excel files shared in DocInfo for XP environment, and they anytime access it, modify the Excel file manually, and then someone else goes, reads the results, applies some other modification. So they are sharing via DocInfo specific editable files. We are talking about end user computing files. No ICT test, once again, will be required. So be sure you're able to identify them just in case. So you won't be required to test them. So we're only going to test something that completely relies on the information technology structure. Interfaces, pretty easy concept. It's an automatic data transfer. The key part is the automatic data transfer between systems. So usually we have an event. It's a time or human-driven event. It triggers a job in the source system. So we have a source system, the A system. There's this job triggered by time, I don't know, on a nightly basis. This job is triggered. It runs a specific SQL procedure, a specific procedure. It generates a file. This file is transferred automatically from the server of the sending system to the server of the receiver one. So it may be performed via SFTP, Connect Direct tool, Spazio tool, even FTP, even if it is not secured, it's considered as an automatic data transfer. Maybe not the best way, but still automated. Once the file is received in the destination system, we have the event triggered at the destination side. There's again one job that runs and imports the data contained in the file directly in the destination database. So the flow is completely automated. There's no human interaction. If there is either an automatic generation, or maybe the generation is automatic, but then these data are received by people that imports them manually, even by performing specific automatic queries or automatic procedures, but they pick up the file and feed the system with the file. This is not an interface. This is a partial or no, or completely manual data transfer. We are not interested in them. We are interested in the completely automated interfaces. So once again, we would be reached. You have been reached out by GCA colleagues. You will be reached out in the next years for new mappings by them, and also auditors will come for asking. Will ask evidence. Please remind them, if just in case, that a specific interface is not automated, so we are not going to test it. So what do we mean when testing IPEs? Auditors wants to prove that the system is working properly. So they are going to cover specific IPE risks. There are 5. The data processed by the IT application from which the IPE is produced is not complete or accurate. In this, then there is the data extracted from the application. I will just read them into the IPE is not the intended data or is not complete. The user entered parameters are inappropriate. The computations or categorizations performed in the creation of the IPE are inaccurate. The data output from the application to the EUC tool is modified or lost in the transfer. Information added or changed using the EUC tool is incomplete, inaccurate, or inappropriate. So we are looking at general risks for all the IPEs. Not all those risks are key risks for the IT IPEs, so the automatic reports or the automated interfaces. Some of them are just focused on, for example, the EUC, or some of them are focused on the business test part, the parameters that enters a business user. It's not part of our test, but this is important to share with you so you know what auditors are going to look at when testing reports with you this year. We are also going to include, and I'm going to show you the testing strategies. So how testing are performed. So what will be asked to you during this year, because this may be confusing, and this is the key part of the training. We have talked about IPEs, but Rossella presented also the automated ETAC controls, so IT automated controls. Those business controls performed entirely by a system, like you have a double entry in the invoicing system, and the invoicing system is automatically blocking this new entry because it's doubled. This is an automated control. It will be tested with the IT application owner of the specific application. There are many testing strategies. Some of them for you are not key this year. They will be key next year. I'm talking about benchmark. We'll talk about it in a while. So we will talk about full test. This may be for reports, interfaces, and automated controls. The full test, it's the actual test of the object. For the reports, we want to prove that in terms of completeness and accuracy, so coming back to the previous presentation, the information that is contained in the report can be viewed and extracted from the system is the same as the ones included in the database. So we are going to inquire the system logic. So when we have the business user clicking in the button to be presented with a report, we have a specific program running. Our question is, what if the program is not properly designed or is not working properly? So the test will be conducted by extracting from the database the raw tables. Auditors will obtain those tables from you. They will then extract the report from the system and will compare. If they match, because they reperform the expected report logic, so the expected program logic, if they will match, it will be passed. If they don't match because the report is actually, I don't know, excluding specific rows for non-declared conditions, it will be a fail for the report because it is excluding key data. Interface, I talked about this data flow. So we have, in this case, we are going to inquire whether this transmission works in terms of completeness and accuracy. I extract 100 data from from the source system. I want to find the exact same data in the target system. Unless there's a specific filter logic in the interface program, it is, of course, declared to the auditor. They will, however, still reperform what the program, so what the two jobs, in this case, the source one and the target one, are going to do, and replicate the flow. So they extract data from the source system, from the target system, compare, they need to match, following, of course, the translation rules that may be applied since systems may differ. Full test of automated, then I will talk about this too. Full test for automated. In this case, we want to prove that the system is going to, let me say, approach properly to specific items. So we will try to obtain a positive result from the system and a negative result from the system. I will talk about it later in the next 10 minutes. Then we have the standard approach. So sometimes systems are not customized by us. They are bought by known vendors. Let me say SAP, once again, it's a good example. When we buy an SAP ECC solution, we have standard reports, the standard transaction, FP05N, I don't know, or the ones for the balance sheet, the income statement, they are generally standard. They are potentially modifiable by the company, but usually nobody modifies these reports. In this case, the key part is to prove that the report is still the same of the one provided by the vendor. I will show you how. Benchmark, this is the one that for this year won't be applied, because to benchmark, we need to prove that since last testing was performed, The program of the automated, the report, the interfaces didn't change. This is not feasible for XP for this year because this is the first SOX year. From the next year on, any report that has already been tested, and since the last test there was no change, there will be the possibility to prove that the program didn't change, and so not to reperform the test, since we know information technology. If the program is still the same, the result of the test will be the same. Some specific details about the testing approach, and also your ownership. Once again, you will have this presentation, so you will be able to go through in detail about it. Full test of the report. As I said, let's start with the report extraction from the system. So there is this specific system. You will be required by external auditors, management tester with our support to perform a specific extraction. So you will extract from the system the report. Then, and of course, give this evidence to the auditor when they will ask. Then we will have the database extraction of the raw data. So if the report is going to extract and combine specific tables, I don't know, 5 tables, you will have the extractions of those 5 tables with the print screen of completeness and accuracy that I talked about. Give these to the auditors. This, once again, will be driven by auditors and management testers with our support. So you will be required to see this in a specific moment. So it's something that you just need to wait to be contacted by them. And then this is part of this is assigned to management tester and external auditors. They will do the check. So they will combine the tables extracted from the database to obtain the same extraction performed at step 1. So it will be their duty. They will replicate the system logic. Of course, they will consult you to have specific information about the system logic, so to replicate it. When we talk about you, we also talk about maybe the suppliers that you have hired for managing the code details, the programs of the tool. Of course, not all you develop and change something at the application level. Then we have the interface, more or less the same thing that I talked about. You are still owners and so responsible and accountable for the extraction, so for providing evidence that auditors and management testers will ask you to provide at a specific moment during the year. So in this case, we have more than one application involved. Data extraction from the source system. So we have the extraction from the database of the source system, once again with the full print screen. Then we have the interface file extraction, the file that is generated by the job and is transferred. Then we have the data extraction from the destination system. So we go in the database of the destination system, extract the tables that are impacted by the job import. Then, and this is the best part, but it's not your duty, it's management testers and external auditors, also they are this one, they will need to check that the data match. So they will start from the database of the sender, so the tables extracted at point 1, they will elaborate them and prove that they match with the file at point 2. Then we'll do the same. Check if the file at point 2 is matching with the tables extracted at the destination system side. If they match, the interface is working properly. It's a specific test performed in a specific moment in time. Full test of automated, as I said, positive and negative scenario. What do I mean? Let's imagine that we are talking about a workflow, okay, an approval workflow. We know that people are assigned to a specific workflow, I don't know, for the order management, so they will need to approve orders. We have specific thresholds for the approvals, so specific people are assigned to a specific threshold to approve. Auditors will test specific scenarios. So we'll ask you to, this is, so as you can see, this is made all together. They will ask you live to try to, or they will ask to specific business people having specific permissions to approve something that is in line with their responsibilities. So it's within their threshold. The system is expected to let this activity pass because they, let me say, are assigned to the specific threshold, so they will need to approve it. Then they will test the negative scenario. The system is expected to block those that try to approve orders that are have an amount higher than their assigned threshold. So they will ask the specific person to try to approve an order that is above their permission. And if the system let them pass, we have a fail because the system is expected to block. If it blocks, we have a success on the test because it is blocking in the proper moment. Some automated controls may be configurable. What do we mean? We mean that the way these automated controls work depend on specific configuration. Once again, the workflow example is the best one. We know that the system blocks based on the assigned permission. So the configuration is the possibility to move people along, through the workflow steps. So I can say that myself, for example, is assigned to approve orders, I don't know, from 0 to 100,000 euros. Somebody, so the part of the configurability, can take my user and assign it to a higher threshold. It is configuring the automated control. In this case, we will have to obtain, auditors will have to obtain the list of people who can configure the automated control. And they, so with this, still with the same evidence that I talked about, so print screen, because we have a list of users, so editable list of users, so a full page print screen, and they will just obtain from business the rules from which these configurable people are assigned to the specific permission to configure the automated control, and they will check if they are appropriate. This is still made mainly by management testers. You will support with the extraction. Let's talk about standard and benchmark very fast. Standard, as I said, they are granted by vendors. To prove this, we have to show that the last modification, so the version of the report or the automated program we are relying on, is certified by the vendor. I will show you some example later. In the benchmark, we will need to prove, so control owners during the testing are required to prove that the last modification date of the program, of the report or of the automated control, or even of the interface, is the same as the last test, as when the last test was performed. Very fast examples. SAP systems. Once again, we have a specific report. We have already seen it. But SAP system, we have the name of the report. We have the filters applied for the generation of the report. We have the name of the system, and also the date and time for which we are performing the extraction. We have also the so we have then the execution of the report from the system. We have the number of rows, system, date, and time. So once again, to be compared with the file that is obtained by the auditor. Standard test example. This is the most interesting part. As you can see, this is a standard report. So we have a print screen that shows the name of the report, and then shows in the version management the last modification date of the system, of the report, and the author, so the owner of the last modification, which is the SAP user. Or for the benchmark, this will not be used this year, the last modification date of a job, the author of the last modification date. And in this case, the auditors will compare this with the last test. So if we tested for SOX purposes this program in 2019, we can, in 2020, I don't know, the 23rd of April, so the next day, we can say that the report didn't change since last testing, so no additional test is performed. You will be able to take a look at the examples because we will share. These are examples for print screens for mainframes and for reporting tools, so for business objects, so specific dashboards performed from them, or specific SQL queries. You will these are examples, you can take a look at them. Legacies, there are plenty of examples. Once again, a recap before closing the meeting. For IPE testing, what is your responsibility? Because we've seen a lot of things. Your responsibility is to support the test. This will not start from you, this procedure. This will start from auditors and management testers. They will come to you and ask for specific evidence. So you will support them in the testing phase and also in the identification. That's why we talked about the different type of IPEs: data retrieve, reports, end user computings, non-automated interfaces. So help them in understanding whether the specific functionality in your technology is either a report, a data retrieve, or an EOC. Once again, review documentation if you are required to, like providing them with the program name and other details, and then provide the explanation and the evidence when required during the testing. So they will ask the database extraction, the system extraction, the job extraction, the file that is transferred for the interfaces. That's your duty. Perform the extraction, provide them with the extraction, and answer to their question just in case they need support. You will always have our support as a SOX IT team and the one of the SOX champions. So you are not alone in the audit procedure. Always reach us for support. That's why we still have your responsibility to ask questions if not clear. So contact us as a SOX IT team, SOX champions, even your manager if you are not if you have doubts on what auditors are asking. We can support you in the identification of what is needed, what auditors are asking. And even if you think that auditors are asking more, still raise the hand and contact us. We can help you in understanding if they are asking more, and we will challenge them in that, or we will explain you why they are actually asking those evidences. Okay, so thank you all for joining. This training has been registered, and so you will have the possibility to look at it on the next Monday. You will receive a specific invitation in your calendar to access this training, so to see it again. Once again, we are going to read all your questions. You have the question and ask. We are going to answer to all of you in general. So we will have a specific question and ask on an email side, and we will also share with you our direct contact, also our SOX IT team, so that you can contact us for further clarification. This session will be followed, as said by Rossella, by specific ITGC training session based on the technology. This will be focused only for those people that are identified as application owner, control owner, or supporting people of control owner and application owner for the SOX applications. This training instead is opened, so the introduction one is open to everybody. Thank you all once again.